And we saw with the Fox News Alert, a brand new poll out on the state of the race in 2016, and it comes just a matter of days before the next presidential debate.
The stakes could not be higher. We'll break down all the latest numbers. We're covering all the news happening now.
It's a monster.
Evacuations underway as one of the most powerful hurricanes in recent history slams into the southeast.
This could just drag on forever, all up the coast.
Why emergency officials are now warning, do not expect us to be there to help you. Plus, the storm is threatening two of the most important battleground states this election year.
Accusations that the two campaigns may be politicizing the hurricane in Florida.
How both presidential campaigns are hunkering down as they enter the home stretch in the race for the White House. It's all happening now.
But we begin with the Fox News Alert on Hurricane Matthew. The storm pounding northern Florida as it closes in on Georgia and South Carolina. Welcome to the second hour of Happening Now, everybody. I'm Jenna Lee.
Still a very dangerous storm. I'm John Scott. Take a live look at Jacksonville, Florida, where the eye of the storm is passing by just offshore. Parts of Georgia now under mandatory and voluntary evacuations. Hurricane warnings stretch well into South Carolina. We have Fox team coverage. Jonathan Sari standing by in Folly Beach, South Carolina. First, though, to Garrett Tenney. He's live in Jacksonville, Florida. Garrett.
Yeah, John and Jenna, we are still an hour away from feeling the full brunt of Hurricane Matthew, but even now we are still seeing gusts of 50 miles an hour. An hour from now, those will go up to 60, 80, even 100 miles per hour. While the winds in their own right are going to be dangerous, that's not what officials are most concerned about. That's the storm surge. You can see here, this is the St. Johns River that runs right through downtown Jacksonville and goes all the way out to the Atlantic Ocean. Now, with this, as Hurricane Matthew comes through, at the full brunt of it, we will see 6 to 9 feet of storm surge downtown. If that happens, you can see this bridge over here down at the end. If it rises 6 to 9 feet, as it potentially could, that is going to cover the end of that bridge. It's going to cover up over these railings and come down over to here to where we are. Now, in the neighborhoods, that's going to be all up in people's homes, their backyards, covering cars, garages. That's why officials have been telling folks to evacuate. They say, do not play around with this storm. If you stay home in these evacuation areas, for the large part, you're going to be on your own because we don't know how quickly we will be able to get there to help you. 450,000 people have been ordered to be evacuated. This morning, officials said they're still not sure how many folks followed through with those evacuations. They say hopefully around 50%. Many of those other folks, though, along the beach said they are going to be staying there in their homes, and that's where the worst of this storm is going to be hitting in about an hour from now. And we'll be keeping track as officials keep an eye on that storm, and especially those beachfront communities. John? You mentioned the river behind you, Garrett, and that's got to be one of the big worries because that storm surge pushes right up that river and far inland. No, absolutely. And officials have said that really they're not quite sure how bad the damage is going to be in a lot of these communities because, frankly, many of these areas have never seen flooding before. That is how historic they are saying this hurricane is going to be on the area. And along the coastline, they said this storm will essentially redraw the coastline for much of Florida. John? Well, we're lucky, at least, that it's staying mostly offshore. The eye of the storm staying offshore. So the worst of the winds are not hitting land, at least not yet. Garrett Tenney in Jacksonville, Florida. Thank you, Garrett.
We'll continue to monitor what's happening in Jacksonville. So far, the forecasts have been fairly accurate. Hurricane Matthew steering east of the southeast coastline as predicted, and thankfully so. Let's bring in someone whose team was first in seasonal hurricane forecasting. Philip Klaasbach is a research scientist and lead tropical prediction forecaster for Colorado State University's Department of Atmospheric Science. He's joining us on the phone from Hawaii, but his expertise really is in hurricanes in the Atlantic and hurricanes in general. Phil, tell us a little bit about this storm in particular. What's noteworthy to you?
Hi, Jenna. The storm has already done quite a bit of damage on its trek through the Caribbean. It's the first hurricane on record to be a major hurricane to hit Haiti, followed by Cuba, and then the Bahamas. And there's already been reports of over 300 fatalities in Haiti. And now it's obviously coming to Florida. It's been tracking right up along the east coast of Florida. Fortunately, so far, the wind or the center of the storm has remained offshore. and it looks like it may remain offshore. But obviously, you're going to still see very significant impacts. We've just seen the water levels are rising in Jacksonville, and there's potential for some significant storm surge inundation there, as well as up into Georgia and then into South Carolina. I saw the governor of South Carolina earlier, Nikki Haley, was very, very concerned about the storm potentially having flooding impacts comparable to those of, say, Hurricane Hugo, as well as the floods from last October as well. So certainly this is a storm that's moving fairly slowly, so there's going to be a lot of rain as well as a lot of storm surge from this event. Winds will be a factor, but probably less of a factor than maybe was feared yesterday, but certainly still strong winds, very heavy rain, and definitely the potential for some significant storm surge as well. So certainly not a storm to be taken lightly.
What's the biggest risk right now as you see it to public safety?
I mean, I think the biggest risk is going to be water inundation, both from a combination of heavy rains as well as the storm surge. The people in these evacuation areas, the storm surge has the potential to be 6 to 9 feet in certain areas, and obviously that's certainly not a place that you want to be if you happen to live below that elevation.
I want to look out a little bit as we continue to just take in Hurricane Matthew and what we're seeing on the screen. You look at forecasting overall for the season. Is this consistent with your forecast? And what else do you see as far as major storms, even beyond Hurricane Matthew?
Yeah, well, the seasonal forecast that we put out was for about an average season, and so far overall it actually has been about average. The numbers are actually going to come in probably fairly close to normal, assuming no other additional significant development later on this season. Overall, the season has been pretty quiet until Matthew. We hadn't really had much in the way of hurricane activity until Matthew, but obviously the last 10 days or so have been very, very active. And so the overall integrated measures that we look at, which were running fairly below normal, are now climbed to somewhat above normal levels, just given how intense Matthew has been.
One of the things we're also seeing on the screen is the track for Matthew several days out, and our viewers will notice that there is a path that looks like it returns Matthew back to the southern part of Florida. What conditions would have to arise that Matthew hits some of the areas that it's already impacted one more time?
There is that potential, but I think if the storm were to come back around, it would be a shell of its former self. 5 days from now, the Hurricane Center is forecasting Matthew to just be a tropical depression. It's going to be encountering some very strong winds in upper levels in the atmosphere, as well as some very, very dry air. So it should start to weaken significantly probably in about 48 hours. So whether the storm does make a second landfall would be a shell of its former self, not likely nearly as significant as right now.
Well, that sounds like good news. You know, I think our viewers will notice that the edge is off a little bit of some of the reporting on Hurricane Matthew, and there's this feeling that it's not as bad as it could be. But I'm curious again, Phil, whether or not that's appropriate, considering that we still very much have a Category 3 hurricane that's going up the coast and hasn't even hit the states of Georgia or South Carolina yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as the storm goes along, really the biggest concern is going to be the storm surge and the inundation associated with that. And still very small wobbles in the track does have the potential to bring the storm onshore, potentially further up into Georgia or South Carolina. So certainly this event is certainly still not over. And especially just the focus of the attention is just going to shift further north as the next couple of days go along. So certainly certainly not out of the woods yet with this particular event.
That's some much needed perspective. Phil, thank you so much. Philip Klossback, again, a research scientist, his expertise particularly in hurricanes. Phil, thank you very much.
Let's take you inside America's election headquarters now, where both major candidates are in full preparation mode ahead of Sunday's second presidential debate. We're being told Donald Trump is spending much of today prepping at Trump Tower in New York, where he will be joined by New Jersey Governor Chris Christie and Republican National Committee Chairman Reince Priebus. Meantime, Hillary Clinton is preparing at her home in Chappaqua, New York. The former Secretary of State looking to maintain her momentum after what was widely considered to be a winning performance in the first contest. All this as we get new Battleground polls that show Hillary Clinton with a 3-point lead in Florida and a 2-point lead in New Hampshire. Let's bring in our political panel. Nina Easton from Fortune magazine. She's a Fox News contributor. And Michael Warren, the online editor for the Weekly Standard. Those poll numbers, Nina, indicate that this is a very important debate for both candidates, especially if Donald Trump wants to stay in this race.
That's right. I mean, and the national polls are also showing Hillary Clinton taking a lead, and I think this has got to be troubling news for Trump and the Trump organization, because at this time, during the last cycle, 2012, the polls were much tighter, and actually, as we know, Obama had a pretty comfortable win at the end. And the other interesting thing that's coming out with these polls is that more people are coming home to a major party candidate. Gary Johnson, the Libertarian candidate, he's had a number of goofs, particularly on foreign policy, and that hasn't served him well. So he's topping out nationally around 7%. And that has actually helped Hillary Clinton, too. So those kind of factors, as well as Trump's performance in the last debate and the fallout in the days after it, I think those are all affecting what we're seeing in the polls today and going into this weekend and going into the next debate.
Michael, let's take a look at some Quinnipiac University polls just hot off the presses. Now, this is a national poll, but in a four-way race, Hillary Clinton is preferred by 45% of those surveyed. Trump at 40%, Gary Johnson at 6%, and Jill Stein at 3%. Last month, actually, it's about 2.5 weeks ago, September 26th, this same poll found the race too close to call. Now it's a 5-point lead for Hillary Clinton. What happened?
Well, the debate happened, and Trump, I think, really struggled to break out of where he is in this poll and really where he was over the last several weeks and months, which is around 40, maybe 42% support, and certainly not as high as 45%, which is where Hillary Clinton finds herself. The thing that changed is that Hillary Clinton, I think, got a lot more support from those undecided voters who are moving to one of the major party candidates after a pretty okay debate performance. And after a rocky September. Now, we have another month of this campaign, and anything can happen. And we were just talking a month ago about how, the trajectory was not good for Hillary Clinton. So Trump could turn this around. The problem is that as that time crunch begins, there's fewer undecided voters for Trump or Clinton to pick up, and Trump has to get a bigger percentage of them than he has been in the last month. This is a big problem for him, and it's really why I think Sunday's debate is so critical. If he can sort of hold it together in the way that he did the first 20 minutes or so of the first debate, for the entire debate, he may be able to right the ship a little bit, but it looks like Clinton was able to do that for herself, and it's just getting a lot tougher for Donald Trump to right his own ship.
Charlie Cook is the longtime author of the Cook Political Report, sort of an expert political analyst. He writes this: the race has fallen into a fairly predictable pattern. When Donald Trump veers off message and Hillary Clinton performs well, her lead swells to 6, 7, or 8 points. When Trump sticks to his script and Clinton goes through a bumpy patch, as she did with her bout of pneumonia, her edge drops down to 1 or 2 points. And sometimes she winds up dead even. Most of the time, Clinton is up by 3 to 5 points. But, Nina, what we've seen in some of the latest polling indicates that the people who have been on the fence and who are getting off the fence are not necessarily falling on to the Donald Trump side.
That's right. I mean, he clearly, as we've talked about before, I mean, he has to get beyond this base, this core base he has in the low 40s. And he's had trouble doing that, particularly when he's off script. And, debates are off script. And Hillary Clinton went into that first debate knowing that he was going to be off script, knowing that she had to get under his skin, which is what she did with the whole Miss Universe episode, and which came back to haunt him several days later when he couldn't even let it go, Donald Trump, and had his tweet storm, as we remembered, which didn't serve him well either. So it's a tough, I think debates can be tough for him because they aren't necessarily reading from a teleprompter or scripted.
And she seemed to sort of jam that Miss Universe reference into an answer where it otherwise didn't seem to belong, as if, well, she knew she would bait him into something. All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And do not forget, all day Sunday here on America's Election Headquarters, Fox News Channel will have live team coverage and analysis before and after the debate. And, of course, you can watch the debate right here on Fox News Channel, 9 p.m. Eastern Time.
Well, a former U.S. Navy vessel comes under attack. Take a look at that. Where this happened, plus who's claiming responsibility. Also, Hurricane Matthew in motion, the storm now making its way towards Georgia and South Carolina. The pressing concern for officials in those states next.
Now, Fox News alert, Hurricane Matthew is blowing across Florida, battering parts of the state, leaving hundreds of thousands of people without power. Right now, the storm is moving toward the Jacksonville area, basically parallel with the coast. The Carolinas are bracing for impact as well. Jonathan Seri is about 250 miles north of Jacksonville in Folly Beach, South Carolina. Jonathan.
John, even at that distance, you can see how conditions even here are beginning to deteriorate. You can see the heavy waves pounding on this pier, and look how far the water has crossed this beach here. The manager of this hotel says that it only comes up to the porch, the veranda area of this hotel, when there is severe weather brewing out in the Atlantic, such as a major hurricane, which we may be dealing with in the coming hours here on Folly Beach. It has started raining just in the past few minutes, raining hard, but before the rain began, we sent our drone up. Take a look at this video from our drone. You can see the waters of the Atlantic churning along the beach area here, and a major concern for Folly Beach and the other barrier islands off the Carolina coast is going to be storm surge. Forecasters say in a worst case scenario, these barrier islands could be dealing with storm surges in excess of 8 feet, and the effects may be felt far inland along the inlets and tributaries in these coastal areas. So in flood-prone areas, first responders have been making reverse 911 calls and going door to door to urge residents to head to higher ground. Governor Nikki Haley made an appeal to stragglers.
There is nothing safe about what's getting ready to happen. This is the last time you will hear my voice when I'm asking you to evacuate. We need everybody to consider evacuating and really take this very seriously.
And so far, 310,000 South Carolinians have heeded the evacuation notices, but state officials would like to bring that figure to at least 500,000. John, back to you.
All right, Jonathan Seri, Folly Beach, South Carolina, waiting for the storm. Thanks.
Well, there's some information about missing Malaysian plane flight MH370. Officials now confirming a piece of an aircraft wing found on the island of Mauritius in the Indian Ocean does, in fact, belong to that missing plane. The piece of wing flap was discovered back in May. Experts analyzing the debris found a part number linking it to MH370. Several pieces of wreckage from that plane have washed ashore near the Indian Ocean after it disappeared in March of 2014 with 239 people on board. The search continues for the rest of the plane off Australia's west coast.
Also in the Indian Ocean right now, Yemeni rebels claim they have sunk a former U.S. Navy ship off the coast. The HSV-2 Swift, as it was named then, suffering major damage in an apparent rocket attack off the coast of Yemen. You can see the holes in the bow as well as some significant fire damage. The vessel is currently operated by National Marine Dredging Company. It was on a humanitarian mission to try to rescue wounded civilians when it came under attack. At last check, the ship was being towed away from Yemen. No word on injuries on board.
Well, the second presidential debate just now 2 days away. So what do the candidates need to do ahead of this next matchup? Howard Kurtz, host of Media Buzz, gives us his take. We're also keeping an eye on Hurricane Matthew. Officials warning people it's far from over as torrential rain and dangerous storm surge continue to pose a threat up and down the southeast coast.
A Fox News alert. Even though the eye of Hurricane Matthew has not come ashore, the hurricane continues slamming Florida before continuing its predicted course up the east coast. And that's Folly Beach, South Carolina on the top left of your screen. Jacksonville, Florida on the top right. Two areas that have yet to feel the full effects of the hurricane. The storm toppling trees and power lines, leaving hundreds of thousands of people without power in Florida. Heavily populated communities in the southern part of the state largely were spared the full force of 120-mile-an-hour winds because the eye of the storm hung just offshore. Officials warning people they are not out of the woods yet. Storm surges remain a problem as Matthew pushes north. The magnitude of the danger coming into focus as we learn the death toll in Haiti now stands at 842. So far, there has been one confirmed death in Florida.
We'll turn back to some politics now. Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump preparing to go toe-to-toe in the second presidential debate in St. Louis this Sunday, which you can see, by the way, on the Fox News channel. Both candidates have been preparing for the big face-off. Hillary Clinton is at her home outside of New York City. Donald Trump is at Trump Tower, where we're told New Jersey Governor Chris Christie and RNC Chairman Reince Priebus are helping get him ready. Fox News media analyst Howard Kurtz joins me now. Howard, you had some thoughts about what needs to happen for round two for both candidates. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, first of all, it's a very different format in St. Louis, where I'll be doing my show on Sunday. Town hall format, as you know, Anderson Cooper and ABC's Martha Raddatz, two moderators. That probably leaves less room for the candidates to attack each other. I'm sure they will find ways. And, you know, every 4 years, I often say that for all of the big ratings and the media attention to these debates, in the end, they end up moving the needle very little. I'm not sure that's the case this year. The first debate at Hofstra, if it wasn't a disappointment for Donald Trump, it was a missed opportunity to kind of move his numbers and expand his base. So this is a sort of a rematch now, a chance for Trump to not only score some points against Hillary Clinton, who did very well on the Long Island debate, but also to expand his appeal and to sort of have that undefinable quality of being presidential.
Undefinable quality it is. People know it when they see it, though. And you said one of the things that you're looking at and how Trump handles it, you call the XX factor. What exactly are you talking about, Howie?
Little chromosomal reference there to Trump standing with women. It's no secret in this campaign. He's got the big gender gap. Hillary Clinton is up among women by as much as 20 points in some of the polls that we have seen. Now, it's interesting because you'll remember at the end of the first debate, Donald Trump said, well, I could say something extremely rough here, but I guess I shouldn't say it. And afterwards, he made clear he was talking about Bill Clinton's past sexual misconduct. Some of his surrogates went on TV and said Hillary Clinton was an enabler back in the 1990s and even the 1980s. But now, Trump telling the New York Post gossipy Page 6, which is where I get a lot of my campaign news, that he will not be going to bringing up the Clinton sex scandals in debate number 2. Probably a wise decision, because I don't think he gets him much. Most of the country has been through the impeachment ordeal and knows all about Bill Clinton's past and Hillary Clinton's connection to that. A chance, moreover, for Trump to do other things that might appeal to some of those suburban women who he has had a hard time connecting with.
I'm curious, two things, Howie. Not only, we were just seeing Lester Holt there, the first debate. We saw the media coverage post that debate. Now we have a vice presidential debate that's happened in between. We've seen the media reaction and coverage to that. How do you think that sets up this debate differently as far as the way the media will be digesting the headlines and then reporting on it in the week that is to come?
Well, first of all, I'm convinced that no moderator can come away unscathed, because there's so much passion and partisanship right now that it's, however Anderson Cooper and Martha Raddatz do, they're going to get hammered by some people. And it's interesting that the commission chose to have two moderators, and also, of course, a lot of the questions will be coming from the audience. I mean, the press likes to pick winners and losers. I think this: 80 million people or something like that will watch debate number 2, just as they did debate number 1. They will form their own opinions. But what happens is when the punditry and the commentary and even the reporting for the next couple of days said, well, this was a terrible moment for Hillary Clinton, or this was a great moment for Donald Trump, or vice versa, and replays it again and again and again, it tends to amplify and sometimes even alter what people thought when they watched it. And so, in other words, Hillary Clinton clearly had a better night after the first debate, but within 48 hours, it was like a complete and total disaster, according to the media, for Donald Trump. Well, not so much. He didn't drop a lot in the polls, although Hillary Clinton did clearly get a bump after Hofstra.
Yeah, something to consider. We definitely had social media, obviously, in 2012, but now we're at a whole other level when it comes to replaying these clips over and
Everybody
over
gets
again.
To weigh in.
Howie, great to see you. Thank you very much. We'll look forward to your show on Sunday. Just a quick reminder on that. We're going to have live team coverage and analysis all day before and after the debate on Sunday. And, of course, you can watch the showdown in St. Louis right here on FNC.
Well, it appears all of Florida will be spared a direct hit from Hurricane Matthew, but forecasters warn the threat is not over yet as that powerful hurricane continues up the eastern seaboard. Meteorologist Janice Dean with the latest on Hurricane Matthew's path coming up. Plus, how both campaigns are responding to the storm and why our next guest says the recovery effort could have an impact on who carries Florida.
Well, right now, hurricane warning is stretching from North Florida to South Carolina as Hurricane Matthew moves up the East Coast. Evacuation orders now in place for areas bracing for impact, and local officials urge people to take this very seriously because the storm is still extremely powerful. Our meteorologist, Janice Dean, will be with us live in the Fox Weather Center, but we heard earlier from one of our guests that this is indeed still a very dangerous storm, and despite the fact that many in Florida feel that perhaps they dodged a bullet, pardon the term, that you can still see based on what we're seeing in radar that you still have a Category 3 storm going into the state of Georgia, potentially along the coast, also in South Carolina. So we're going to be watching this closely. Of course, you'll remember that the projections put this storm going up the East Coast. So when Janice joins us in just a moment, we'll ask her whether or not that's completely off the table. So we'll have more with Janice Dean in just a moment. John?
In the meantime, both the Trump and Clinton campaigns are pulling their staffers out of harm's way as they respond to that evolving crisis, which could turn into a major issue in the race for the White House. Let's bring in Doug Schoen, Fox News contributor and former advisor to President Bill Clinton. Also with us, Brad Blakeman, former deputy assistant to President George W. Bush. So what do these campaigns, Doug, have to think about as the hurricane hits and as the aftermath and the cleanup begins?
Well, a couple of things. Look, Governor Rick Scott has been very aggressive in seeking federal aid for the state in advance of the now Category 3 hurricane. And how Governor Scott handles the cleanup, whether it's a significant cleanup or hopefully a less substantial impact on the state, could well impact the election. Why? Because Governor Scott's popularity is directly linked to that of the Republican Party and Donald Trump. On the other hand, if there are problems with the cleanup, it only paints a picture of a Republican Party that would be seen as more out of touch. The presidential race is now effectively tied in Florida, so even a slight impact here could influence the vote a month from now.
We remember, what happened after Hurricanes Sandy and Katrina.
Absolutely.
More on that in just a second. But, Brad, Donald Trump is not an office holder. He's a wealthy man. He could write some checks, but he can't order National Guardsmen out or do anything like that. What should he do, say, in a state like Florida, as he's trying to win that state?
Well, what I think he should do is fire up Trump Force One. He has an airplane loaded up with supplies, liaison between communities that are affected, charities, and tell them, I'm loading up my plane, what do you need? I'm going to turn my campaign workers into volunteers and ask them to distribute the kind of aid that I will bring to your cities, and then coordinate with the Salvation Army, local authorities, churches, synagogues, mosques, and make sure that the people are getting what they need. A good response like that is not political, and it shows action, and it shows caring, not only for Battleground State, but for people who are affected. And that goes up the seaboard as well, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. Be proactive and use your campaign resources to actually help people now.
I mentioned, some of the earlier storms, superstorm Hurricane Sandy that hit New York and New Jersey. Chris Christie was criticized. This was on the eve of President Obama's re-election effort. Chris Christie was criticized for, being seen as being too friendly with a president who was not too popular in Republican circles at that time. And then, of course, and Brad, you probably well remember this.
Sure.
There was George W. Bush's flyover in Air Force One of all of the damage in New Orleans and that area from Hurricane Katrina. He was criticized for not setting down and, helping the people or taking in the damage, at least, from a ground level. It's kind of you're darned if you do, darned if you don't, Doug. What's a political candidate, not an office holder, but what's a political candidate supposed to do?
Well, I think Brad gave very good advice to Donald Trump and his campaign, and he would do well to follow that to the letter. I would say, given the examples you cited, the beginning of the end of the Bush presidency was how he handled Katrina. And, you're doing a hell of a job, Brownie, will be indelibly etched on his political persona. On the other hand, Chris Christie may well have elected or re-elected Barack Obama with how he handled the cleanup and how he handled President Obama with the now famous hug and embrace, and when Christie said this is a nonpartisan issue. That gave a lot of swing voters license to vote for President Obama. So again, this is a very, very difficult situation to assess until we know the precise damage and how the candidates respond and how those in office respond.
If Doug is right, Brad, I mean, you know, if Chris Christie essentially gave the election to Barack Obama, it just goes to show how heightened the sensitivities have to be over the way the candidates react to this thing. Now, in Florida, for instance, the Democrats have asked the governor to extend early voting or early voting registration should the governor, and the governor has said he's not going to do that. But why is that such an issue, and is that going to contain some blowback?
Well, to me, I thought it was poor timing on Hillary Clinton's campaign to do two things. One is to immediately seek advertising on the Weather Channel to try and exploit the viewers that are moving there to get critical information. And number two is right out of the box asking for this extension of time, not even talking about the empathy they have for the people that are affected by this. So timing is everything. Politicizing a national disaster is something I don't think that voters are going to take too kindly to. Doug is absolutely right. It's an absolute fine line that politicians have to make between being political and being caring and apolitical. And I think right now the time is to be smart. And what you do is you think of the people who are most affected, and if you'll make good decisions for those people, you'll make good political decisions as well.
Very quick look at the latest Real Clear Politics average poll out of Florida. Hillary Clinton up just over 3 points on Donald Trump. But, Doug, those are numbers that you say could change based on how the two candidates respond to what's happening there.
Absolutely. That's effectively the margin of error. A couple of polls out, I think, Thursday. One had Trump a point or two ahead. Another had Secretary Clinton 3 points up. So really, what happens, how Trump, Secretary Clinton, and how Governor Scott handle this could make a difference. And I'll throw out an idea. What the candidates say in the debate Sunday and potentially what they do Saturday or even Sunday morning could well have an impact on how people perceive the impact of the hurricane.
It will be fascinating to watch. Again, our thoughts and prayers with the people of Florida and the other states that are still yet to be impacted by this storm. Doug Schoen, Brad Lakeman, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Let's talk a little bit more about that storm and what it looks like this weekend. Our senior meteorologist Janice Dean joins us once again from the Fox Extreme Weather Center. What are we watching? What are we looking ahead towards, JD?
Still a hurricane, still a major hurricane offshore, Jenna, and now we are concerned with Georgia and the Carolinas as we think the legacy of this storm perhaps is going to be a life-threatening storm surge because the counterclockwise winds around this major hurricane is pushing ocean water into these very vulnerable areas that could on order see 6 to 12-foot storm surge on top of high tide. So you have to know what your high tide is, and you have to know if you're where you are at sea level. If you're at sea level, you're going to be dealing with the potential for very dangerous catastrophic storm surge. We still have hurricane warnings for millions of people stretching up to North Carolina. That's the takeaway. And the storm surge is what you're going to hear everyone talking about right now. 8 to 12 feet on top of high tide could be life-threatening, and that's what we're going to be concentrating on over the next 24 to 36 hours.
We'll continue to watch it, JD. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, we are following the latest from Hurricane Matthew, also more political fallout from Hillary Clinton's email situation. The newly uncovered documents that reveal how the White House tried to help her campaign get out in front of the scandal. Hurricane Matthew still a very dangerous Category 3 storm. It has mostly stayed offshore, that is the eye, and that noon to 3 o'clock quadrant, if this were a clock, has stayed offshore. That's where the worst of the wind and the rain are. So that's the good news. We're going to get an update from the National Hurricane Center and Director Rick Knabb in about 13 minutes, top of the hour, the latest on the coordinates and what they expect from this storm.
Well, some new information on what some consider another controversy dogging Hillary Clinton's presidential bid. Documents obtained by the Republican National Committee revealing the White House coordinated with the Clinton campaign regarding the damage control over her use of private email. Our senior political correspondent, Mike Emanuel, is live outside Clinton's home in Chappaqua, New York. Mike?
Well, hi, Jenna. Yeah, these emails were obtained by the Republican National Committee through a Freedom of Information Act request of the State Department. Some were shared with Fox News. They reveal close coordination between Jennifer Palmieri, who was at the White House and had announced that she was heading to the Clinton campaign, and Jen Psaki, who was at the State Department and ultimately replaced Palmieri at the White House. They were trying to make sure Secretary of State John Kerry would not face questions that weekend about Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server during her time at the State Department. Palmieri emailed Psaki on March 12, 2015. Think we can get this done so he is not asked about email? Psaki replied, agree completely and working to crush on my end. Then a day later, March 13th, Psaki emailed good to go on killing CBS idea. CBS News ended up with an interview of John Kerry in Egypt with their State Department correspondent, and the email server issue did not come up. A CBS News spokesperson tells us, quote, no subject was off limits when this interview was arranged, as is the CBS News standard. Now, we've reached out to Jen Palmieri of the Clinton campaign. She has not replied to our request for comment. An Obama administration official responded a short time ago saying they have been transparent about coordination between the Obama White House and the Clinton campaign about issues related to her time as Secretary of State. Jenna?
Mike, thank you.
Well, the jobs report for the month of September is out now, so how'd our economy do? A look at the industries that added some jobs and others that were worse off. Plus, we're tracking Hurricane Matthew, the president urging people in the storm's path to get out of the way as time runs out to evacuate in low-lying areas along the coast.
Hello everyone, I'm Sandra Smith. The city of St. Augustine almost completely underwater as Hurricane Matthew pummels the East Coast. We have new distressing video coming out of there. Plus concerns about Matthew's concentric eye walls and storm surge. How dangerous is that surge? We will explain. And Donald Trump being told at a Border Patrol meeting this morning that people at the Mexico border are being fast-tracked and allowed in so that they can vote in this election. Problem? That and more on America's election headquarters coming up.
One of the top issues of the presidential election, jobs. The new jobs report released today showed U.S. employers adding 156,000 jobs last month. That's lower than the 175,000 jobs experts predicted. Fox Business Network's Peter Barnes live with more from Washington. Peter.
That's right, John. And on top of those lower than expected numbers, the unemployment rate ticked up to 5% from 4.9% in August, the first time it has been back at 5% since April. But that is mainly because more people entered the workforce and not all of them had yet found jobs. Many economists, including President Obama's, consider that good news.
When people are on the sidelines and they come back in, and why do they come back in? They come back in because they see the economy adding jobs and they see wages rising and they want to participate in that, and that's what we're seeing.
So let's take a look at the sectors that added jobs in September. They include professional and business services, up 67,000, education and health, up 29,000, construction added 23,000, and you can bet that with the hurricane, that number is going to go up next month, unfortunately. Retail up 22,000. Sectors losing jobs in September included manufacturing, down 13,000. Government, mainly local governments, cut 11,000 positions last month. Transportation and warehousing down 9,000. Mining and logging, which includes the battered energy secretary, stopped losing jobs this month, perhaps showing some sign of stability, but added no new jobs. Of course, this report comes just before the next presidential debate on Sunday, and you can bet that it will come up then. No comment on it yet from Hillary Clinton, but Donald Trump, in a little preview, said in a statement, quote, after 7 hard years of the Clinton-Obama administration, their policies still can't produce better paying jobs and upward mobility. John?
All right, Peter Barnes, Fox Business. Thank you, Peter.
You bet.
We're tracking Hurricane Matthew, the storm maintaining Category 3 strength as it closes in on Georgia and South Carolina. Meantime, we're getting a clearer picture of the damage left behind in Florida. Fox News team coverage continues as we await an update from the National Hurricane Center just moments from now.
So we are not out of the woods yet by any stretch of the imagination on Hurricane Matthew. That storm still offshore. That's the good news. But there's a lot of country yet to cover, and Georgia and the Carolinas are next.
You made a really good point, too, John, as we were looking at some of the numbers from Haiti that appear to be going way higher than we originally thought as far as fatalities, that it does take a couple days sometimes to really assess the damage and also lives lost.
I was in Miami for Hurricane Andrew. We thought, after the storm blew through, that everything was pretty much okay, but I was north of downtown. The damage south of downtown was horrific. So
we'll wait and see, be cautiously optimistic, and we thank you so much for joining us.
America's election headquarters starts now.